Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining our webinar today. I am going to give us a few more minutes before we really move forward, just to allow some additional attendees to join. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. I am so excited for today's webinar. It is the first of our series with this higher education consortium. I think you all will get some really good tips and strategies for recruiting our professional development specialists. And today we're going to be featuring the Nebraska Extension and our very own council's training and development team. So today, I'm going to introduce all of our speakers today, including myself. We want you to walk away with the understanding of the roles, responsibilities, and eligibility requirements for our professional development specialists. The New England Extension has a very strategic approach to how they build their pool of PD specialists, and they're going to share some testimonials with you and some strategies on identifying those specific needs in your own state. So today we have myself, I'm Alicia Carter. I am the Credentialing Academy support. So I am very much involved in our council alumni network and in our higher education consortium. So if you join the consortium, you will definitely be speaking with me very often. We also have our Shonda Walden from the council. She is the manager of the training and development department and specifically manages the professional development specialists. And then we also have Linda Reddish. She is with New England's Nebraska's Extension statewide educator. Janae Chapman, who is with Nebraska's Department of Education program specialist, and Tasha Wolf, Nebraska Extension's county extension coordinator. So I'm going to pass this on to Shonda, who will go into what it means to be a PD specialist and what that role, responsibility, and eligibility requirements are.
Hello, and thank you, my esteemed colleague. I am Shonda Walden, and as Alicia said, we are responsible for our professional development specialist community. And just to let you all know, we have a little over 7,000 PD specialists that are global, And we have a team of 4 people. That's right, 4 people who manage all of this. So I ask that everyone be gentle on our team. We will go over the roles, responsibilities, qualifications, and eligibility to become a PD specialist. Alrighty, so who are our professional development specialists? Throughout this presentation, you'll hear professional development specialist, you'll hear PDS, or you'll hear PD specialist. It all means the same thing. So our community exists of early education experts, and these are the experts who have knowledge and experience to support the development of our CDA candidates, and they support the assessment process. They are recognized for their contributions to the field. And please pardon me, I have a little delay in my suddenly it's not working. Okay, here we go. Bear with me. The role of our PD specialist. The role of the PD specialist is extremely important because this is a person that mentors and coaches the candidate during the verification visit. So it's really important that our PD specialists are active listeners, very patient, and actually enjoy engaging in conversations. Because at the same time, our PD specialists, they're lending their expertise to the candidate. And as you can imagine, sometimes for our candidates, this is the first and maybe the only time they've had another early education expert in which to share their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations with. You know, sometimes people go into early education thinking it's with the old mindset of babysitting or daycare, but it isn't. This is early childhood development. And so having someone mentor and coach you, you know, during this verification visit is an extremely important aspect of the entire experience. So our PD specialists, while they're mentoring, coaching, and lending their expertise, they're also reviewing and verifying the candidate's competencies using our ROR model, or the review, observe, and reflect model during the verification visit. Alrighty, so the responsibilities of our PD specialist. These are early education experts who are committed to maintaining the council's policies and procedures. And our PD specialists are integral in helping the council and all of early education protect the integrity of the credential. Now, keep in mind, we want to make sure only qualified people should be in the classroom teaching our youngest learners. So we want to make sure that our PD specialists are following policies and procedures, because that helps to protect the integrity of the credential. And our PD specialists are responsible for staying abreast of latest changes and modifications. And if you've ever engaged with a council, you know that we are always at the forefront of creating and modifying our process to make it a better experience for our candidates. Alrighty, so what's the eligibility? How can I become a PD specialist? Well, we ask that our applicants have access to technology, use an email address that they check regularly. I cannot stress that enough, and have access to the internet. Applicants are required to have the knowledge and skills of working with diverse populations. This is extremely important. Also important is that our PD specialists know and understand both national and local standards and the requirements of child care programs. And this is especially important in your local area, to know what the licensing requirements are, for example, and what the regulations are. And not that, you know, the PD specialist is going and assessing that, but it does help. It does help during the observation process, because this is a competency-based credential. So we also require that all of our PD specialists have, at a minimum, an associate's degree. So everyone has a degree, and then, of course, it goes up from there. And their coursework should center in early childhood education or child development, or in an area closely related to those two. We do ask that, or not say ask, but we do require our PD specialists to have experience working with children from birth to 5 years of age. Now, this is direct work experience. This is the applicant working directly with children, not from a management position, but actually have hands-on classroom experience. Now, this experience can be both voluntary and paid experience. So there are lots of people who have experience through, volunteerism, which is great. We do accept that, and we do ask people to include that on their applications. And the applicant should have experience facilitating the growth of another adult. And the PD specialist should be available to conduct the assessments, the verification visit during the regular work week. And that's, to include also, for example, I'm in Washington, D.C., and there are 24-hour centers. So there may be candidates who might ask for some irregular hours. So that doesn't happen often, but that's something to keep in mind. So as you can imagine, we're always in recruiting. We're always in recruitment mode for PD specialists. Though I said we have a bit over 7,000, not everyone is where we need them to be. So we're always recruiting. We want to make sure that we blanket the entire canvas of where CDA candidates are. We want to blanket that area to make sure that we have more than enough PD specialists to accommodate our candidates. So we are looking for early education and or child development specialists, people who enjoy working with diverse populations, those who have a professional approach to work, and that includes their presentation. They also understand the dynamics of observations, and we know this is a whole science, so we're asking people to draw from that experience in making that assessment as they observe the candidate during the 2-hour assessment of the verification visit, which is, by the way, a total of 4 hours, I want to say. And this is a person who also enjoys working with candidates. So this is a person who, enjoys coaching and mentoring and engaging with people who are absolute strangers, connecting with them, being an active listener, totally engaged with the candidate to help facilitate this successful verification visit experience. So we're looking for people who are center directors and owners, those who may serve as administrators or educators at some level, both in, public private school all the way up to post-secondary, and those who are serving as trainers. And again, as long as folks meet those eligibility requirements, we do invite people to apply. Now, our PD specialists, most PD specialists are paid an honorarium of $100. I say most because some, believe it or not, are voluntary. So we do have a cadre of volunteer PD specialists. We so appreciate them. And we also have PD specialists that work for agencies. So in that instance, if a person works for an agency, the agency receives the honorarium. But for those that are independent contractor, which is the bulk of our PD specialist community, they receive a $100 honorarium for every successful verification visit that is completed. And I want to go back for a second. There was a very important word here in the last sentence that says compliant. So all of the visits must be compliant, and those visits are compliant by following policies and procedures. Alrighty, so where does a PD specialist fit in the credentialing process? Because our process is candidate driven. So you see the arrow here from the blue, from preparation all the way to the credentialing decision, which is to the right of your screen, which is green. The PD specialist is kind of sort of maybe 3/4 of the way in because the candidate has an assessment process, which includes the exam and the verification visit. Now, a candidate can do either one in whatever order he or she decides. So they could either schedule the verification visit first, then have the exam, or vice versa. It does not matter because it is a candidate-driven process. All right, so to be or not to be the PD specialist. Our PD specialist must be aware of conflicts of interest, must conduct the verification visit in the setting for which they have received an endorsement. If they're bilingual, they must be able to read, speak, write the language of the candidate and perform the verification visit, bilingually. I don't know if that's a word, but we'll use it today. And if the candidate is a monolingual candidate, meaning there's only one language spoken in their program, the PD specialist must be able to speak the language of the assessment. And our PD specialist, again, must follow those policies and procedures. I cannot stress that enough. And we do require that if our PD specialists have questions, they can always call. Many people call me in the middle of a verification visit for a point of clarification. Otherwise, our candidate's candidacy could be compromised. And we want to avoid that at all costs. Now, I did press page down. Okay, here we go. Conflicts of interest. Now, this is a set of 6 points that a PD specialist should commit to memory. So a PD specialist cannot serve the candidate if they are the candidate's relative related by blood, marriage, or other legal relationships, if they are a direct supervisor, teacher, trainer, director, center employee, including, for example, co-worker in the same group, classroom, or center site in the past 3 years, is a candidate's employer. Item number 2, you have a child in a candidate's class or group, cannot serve as PD specialist. Item number 3, if you have served as a candidate's PD specialist before for another credential or if they're reapplying. Fourth item is if you or your organization has a financial or contractual interest related to the candidate or may benefit in any way from the candidate's credentialing decision. Stay away from that situation. And for the 5th point, if a person who may have a personal or professional bias toward or against the candidate or any group of which the candidate is a part. So this includes friend, peer, or foe. You may either totally be in love with the candidate because you know them from a previous relationship or previous engagement, and you're more inclined to not to be objective. You shouldn't serve as a PD specialist. And if there are dislikes about a particular program director, candidate, etc., you should not serve as PD specialist. And if a PD specialist is also a licensing agent that has conducted a review or inspection of some sort within the past 2 years for the child care facility. It's very difficult for our licensing agents to take that hat off and then put on the PDS hat. We've had quite a few experiences with our PD specialist having difficulty navigating through that. Okay. So verification visits are conducted in the candidate settings. And of course, you probably know that we have 4 settings: infant, toddler, these are center-based infant, toddler, center-based preschool, family child care, and home visitor programs. Our PD specialists are endorsed in either one or more of these settings. I feel like I'm holding my breath every time I hit the keyboard. All right, so our ROR model. Our verification visit lasts a total of 4 hours, nothing less than 4 hours. The first hour, the PD specialist is reviewing the candidate's professional portfolio and all the items in there, making sure that the candidate has met all of the requirements. Second part is the observation component. This is a 2-hour observation where our PD specialist is observing the candidate, serving as a lead teacher, demonstrating their competencies within the functional areas. So they are looking for that. And then that last part is the reflective dialogue. And this is where the mentoring and coaching that I was talking about earlier comes into play. And this is a 1-hour dialogue. And we have a whole reflective dialogue agenda for our PD specialists to follow until they kind of get the hang of it. And then they can feel a bit better in the free flow of that dialogue. All right, so organization is key. I'm going to tell you, conducting verification visits is not easy. There are many steps and there's a lot of stuff to know. So organization is key. We do require our PD specialists to arrive on time and introduce yourself. And that means introducing yourself from the first person you see. Somebody may have to buzz you into that program to, the front desk person, all the way through the center director or administrators, the candidate and the candidate supervisor. Introduce yourself and, tell them why you're there. Our PD specialists are required to get what am I trying to say? Our PD specialists are required to see the candidate's identification. The candidate's identification must match what is on the application. And then the PD specialist begins the verification visit using the ROR model and records their scores and comments using the comprehensive scoring instrument, or the CSI. So our PD specialists, they take the candidate's professional portfolio and the competency standards book for 1 hour. They're reviewing it. Then again, they're observing the candidate for 2 hours as a lead teacher, then engaging in a reflective dialogue for 1 hour in a private space. And at the end of the visit, the PD specialist returns the candidate's portfolio and the competency standards book, keeps the comprehensive scoring tool, the CSI, for at least 1 year, and never, ever, 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 ever share scores or comments about the verification visit with anyone outside of the council. We'll just say it that way. I think that's safe. All right, and now I'll turn it over to the next person. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Shonda. We're going to now move it over to our Nebraska team. So they are going to introduce themselves and then share their experience around recruiting PD specialists.
Thank you, Shonda and Alicia. My name's Linda Reddish, and I am an Extension statewide educator at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I'm joined today with two of my great colleagues in Nebraska who will go ahead and introduce themselves now, and then we'll loop back and I'll share a little bit about our section of the presentation.
Hey everyone, my name is Tasha Wolf and I'm an Extension educator here in Nebraska. I'm with the Learning Child team and I'm based out in the counties. And I'll pass it to Janae.
Hello everyone, my name is Janae Chapman. I am a program specialist with the Nebraska Department of Education, Office of Early Childhood.
Thank you, Tasha and Janae. We're really excited to be with you all today to share a little bit of information about what we've been able to accomplish in Nebraska at a local level, as Tasha introduced herself, meaning what's occurring at the county level in our state of Nebraska, and then across all of our 93 counties in the state. What we've been able to do at the state level with our colleague Janae Chapman, who works for the department, the State Department's Office of Early Childhood, and then to share at a national level our really great collaboration and partnership that we've engaged in with the council. So what we thought we'd start first with, sort of is just to touch base about our agenda of what we're going to go through, because in order to explain how and why we took the approach we did in Nebraska, we thought it might be a little helpful to go over some of the demographics and kind of paint a picture of what and how and who is happening in Nebraska, and sort of help paint that picture of our landscape. And then the other part we thought we'd talk a little bit about is, if this is the first time you're hearing about extension, it's really helpful to know what is cooperative extension, because it is a national organization and service that happens across our nation. And then we wanted to talk about then what that link to higher education is, because we know we might have some folks today on the webinar that are in higher education roles, and talk about what it means to be an extension educator and a specialist, and how that's helped us to establish our recruitment strategies of professional development specialists in Nebraska. All right, so before I share a little bit more about what is cooperative extension, we thought we'd take a poll here. Have you, or do you know what is cooperative extension, or have you heard about it? Are you familiar? All right, go ahead and get your answer in now. And let's see our results. All right. So it's interesting to see. So it seems like some folks are familiar, some would like a little bit more information. I think what's really helpful is to just talk a little bit then about that. Some folks who are familiar with cooperative extension have often heard of it as, their familiarity with 4-H. So they'll say, yeah, I know cooperative extension. I did 4-H, when I was younger, or my children are, in 4-H, and they're involved in 4-H youth development, and they often show at fair. Others have said, yes, I'm aware of the services extension provides to the agricultural community. And so I often go to them if I need help with either some of my questions around gardening or horticulture. And then what I think is really helpful to know about cooperative extension is that it's been around for 100+ years. And really what it is it's an extension agency within the U.S. Department of Agriculture that is tied to a state land grant-based university. And there are many different other areas and sectors within extension that are really diverse, such as nutrition, healthcare, business, community vitality. And what we love about Nebraska is that we have an entire team devoted to early childhood development. And so because we have this incredible early childhood development team, other states have family and consumer science teams, but in our state we have this really targeted approach in early childhood, but we get to be, as Nebraska Extension, the informal outreach arm of the university. We often call ourselves the state university. We're that bridge extension between our state's land grant-based university, UNL, located in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the people in Nebraska, all of those 93 counties, by translating that research into education and action. And what we do that, and how we do that, is through our extension staff. So we have educators, we have specialists, assistants, and others who are carrying out that work, and that is core across all land grant-based universities nationwide. So on the next slide, what I'm going to show you here is really this kind of approach about how this work is carried out. And this is kind of a simplified approach for how Extension has traditionally implemented its educational programming efforts. And you're going to see this slide come up again and again throughout our presentation. So you'll notice here Conklin's theory, and what these elements really have at the core are 3 primary processes. 1, planning, 2, implementation, and then 3, program evaluation. And so around that planning phase, you're going to see we do some needs assessments, some designing, some planning around how we might do that. And then what we're going to think about is then, you know, how does all of that happen in combination to do some actual programming implementation? And then around the circle, you'll notice that blue one is evaluation. We see that as a consistent, ongoing effort to help us link all together those pieces. And we design all of those components because we see that as like really the foundation for successful extension programming efforts. Now, I mentioned on the last slide that we do this work through extension educators and through extension specialists. And so you might be wondering like, okay, well, what's that role? What do specialists and educators do? Well, educators like myself, like Tasha, we are individuals who teach and deliver professional development to our targeted audience. In this particular case, right, it's early childhood. So that might be the early childhood workforce, children, you know, birth to age 8, and families. And we define families broadly because it could be, you know, the direct parents, it could be grandparents, it could be foster families. We really think about being responsible within that early childhood development period. And so specialists are really individuals who have a dual role then. They're often faculty who have an appointment at the college. Remember how I said we were the state university, so often at UNL. And they carry out research in their extension role to help educators and collaborate with educators to do this needs assessment, this planning, this design, and evaluation to make sure that we are delivering educational programming that's really applying solutions to emerging problems and that it's rooted in really good practice and sound research. So now I'm going to show you about, on the next slide, you know, how this approach has supported, you know, why we're doing what we're doing in Nebraska. Well, I mentioned our demographics, right? So the findings on this page and our stats come from Nebraska's Department of Labor. There was a report in 2018 and it was really focused on like our economic outlook and insights to address sort of these training needs and educational needs to help our employers and educators throughout our state really try to see if there's any skill imbalances or deficiencies across all Nebraska labor sectors. And what we noticed when we were reviewing the report is that overall, right, our population of Nebraska is 1.9, but we have one of the highest two-parent or working families in the workforce compared to other states throughout the nation. So if we have one of the highest numbers of families working in the workforce, then where are the children going, right? The other part that we found is, you know, for the most part, Nebraska comprises of non-Hispanic whites, right? 78% of our population fits into that particular demographic. It's also, you know, in 2030, we're seeing that the 65 and older demographic is expected to increase by about 38%. And so as that baby boomer generation passes into that age group, this is going to be a significant transition of our workforce because there's going to be a gap there then by 2030, particularly in rural communities of who's going to then fill in those slots. How are we going to account for not only the care that individuals are going to need as they enter into that demographic, but who's going to fill the workforce that they no longer are providing as they transition into retirement. Next, the state has seen significant growth in its minority populations over the past 5 years. Particularly Nebraska's Hispanic and Latino population has had the largest increase. And so as we think about that, that means then that 14% of Nebraska's children speak a language other than English at home. So painting a little bit of Nebraska's demographics, thinking about our theory, keep that in mind, right? Needs assessments, planning, design. Now, my colleague Tasha, who I'm going to kick it over to, is going to talk a little bit more about early childhood in Nebraska and how that particular demographic fits into this bigger picture of Nebraska.
Thank you, Linda. So as we know, early childhood educators form a central role in many young children's lives, especially since, according to Mommy Dova and Associates, 60% of US 3 to 5-year-olds are spending an average of 36 hours a week in center-based childcare. Since early childhood educators play such a central role, Dr. Holly Hattenbowers, a Nebraska Extension Specialist, says, it's imperative that our early childhood workforce, particularly early childhood directors and teachers, are physically and emotionally well. Teachers who are well, who have better health, are going to have more supportive and healthier relationships with children and families. So as we talk about the importance of early childhood educators, it's also important to recognize some barriers they may face. In 2019, another Nebraska Extension Specialist, Dr. Dipti Deb, along with others, found that rural providers were more likely to report barriers such as the inability to travel and limited access to training. The results revealed that childcare type, geographic location, participants in programs such as the Child and Adult Care Food Program and Go Nebraska Nutrition and Physical Activity Self-Assessment for childcare influence childcare providers' motivation, preferences, and barriers to attend training. So let's talk a little bit more about rural communities and about community vitality. Let's take a poll to see if your community has community vitality issues. And it's okay if you don't know or are not familiar with what community vitality is or what those issues are. We'll explain it a little bit further. And if we're ready, I think we can share the results. Okay, so it looks like about 100% of you guys said no, and you don't know, and that's great to know as we go forward. So at Nebraska Extension, simply put, the definition of community vitality is having communities where people want to live and work. So maybe in the chat box, with a little bit of information that we just shared, will you let us know from your early childhood professional's perspective, what are the supports or barriers to having childcare recognized as a community vitality issue in your community? I just want to give you enough time to think about that and post. In the chat box if possible. Okay. Well, if you're still thinking and processing, feel free to continue to put in the chat as I continue to go on. So when rural communities lack access to affordable, high-quality childcare, there are significant implications for the viability of local economics and the well-being of children, families, and their communities. So as we know, if you need workers, you need childcare for those workers. And so that's really what the community vitality is looking at. So let's look a little bit more at the needs of rural areas. Thank you. So Dr. Holly Hattenbauer and colleagues collaborated with researchers at K-State to gain a clearer picture of the childcare needs, challenges, and opportunities in regards to the shortage and challenges of childcare in rural areas. And if you would like more information on this and about this study, We'll have a contact slide at the end of this presentation. So this study had a total of 22 counties with 339 respondents from within Nebraska, and the majority were classified as rural counties. Some of the top childcare related barriers were quality, cost and affordability, dependability, the ability to find temporary childcare, and scheduling care to match their work schedule. Here was what was also learned in this study. Folks want future investments that are needed to address the challenges facing families and to help build and sustain rural communities. One of those investments is early childhood care. Second, there is an opportunity to leverage the strengths of rural communities to meet their expressed needs. These include strong overall support for community development and growth, and the caring and supportive people. So as a team, we recognized our next action step. We needed to start thinking about additional funding needed to move towards applying the research with active participation from rural communities. So before we move on, let's take a poll to see where the need for childcare is in your state. Okay, and if we're ready, we can show the results of that. Okay, well, when we think about the needs of rural communities, we need to also reflect back on the demographics that Linda shared about the increase in minority populations. Oh, okay, the results are in, and it looks like all is the majority here, which that makes sense. Childcare is in a need right now, so thank you for participating in that. So we want to look back at the demographics that Linda shared with our increased minority populations, especially the Latino population within pockets of rural communities. Data from this study indicates that while ethnic minorities may move to a community for jobs, whether they stay is based on a variety of subjective factors, including whether they feel a sense of community and belonging. There are activities for the family, especially the children. There are cultural resources, and whether or not they experience discrimination. Let's look at some more early childhood workforce barrier factors. So as you can see on this slide, oh, sorry, back one. As you can see on this slide, the barrier factors are the lack of transportation and broadband access in rural communities, the financial constraints and a shortage of alternative practicum settings to meet the needs of students. They're working full time, so it's hard to get to professional development when you're busy. They attain the skills and knowledge they need. That's kind of what is a barrier to them. So we know this information, and we want to kind of move on to what we need to do. So let's look at kind of our thought process there. So we know there's this rural child care shortage that we're experiencing, and we kind of wanted to know, how do we strengthen Nebraska's career advancement and the professional pathways? And Linda's going to talk more about our process in that.
Thanks, Tasha. So, I think the part that's really helpful for all of us to think about too a little bit when I saw the poll results was that though we all recognize, right, that especially in the last year, more childcare is going to be needed because we're building back up the profession after a particularly difficult and hard year for the early care and education workforce. Many centers were forced to close. They were operating on really difficult, strenuous budgets and circumstances. The next item that showed up as a need and identified was that rural part, and that was that 33%. So to me, that was just kind of an interesting aha when I saw the poll results pop up. And so I would just guess what I want to reflect back is that it's confirming that, yes, we are experiencing this rural childcare shortage. This has been sort of a consistent theme that's been lifted up. And so when we look back to Conklin's theory, remember that slide, right, with the little funnel, looking at our needs assessments, thinking about planning and design so that we can do some program implementation. Okay, well, our role as the state's university and in the early childhood sector is to be supporting that career advancement and supporting those professionalism pathways. So how can we strengthen Nebraska's career advancement and professional pathways? We're looking at this rural childcare shortage. Families identified quality as one of the top barriers. We have 93 counties in Nebraska. At a local level, we're hearing, yeah, based on research, right, that Tasha referenced at the very beginning slide, geographic locations, timing, type of care, distance. These are all barriers that rural childcare providers are sharing, having difficulty in accessing the professionalism, the professional development needed to do that advancement and that professionalism to strengthen their own career. So we look at that middle square and go, I wonder what we need to do then next, knowing that we have this additional information. So as a team, we said, I'm wondering if we need to take an interdisciplinary approach, meaning the team, the Nebraska Extension Learning Child Team, our early childhood development team, and think about how can we work with state and national partners to build a geographical diverse pool of PD specialists in Nebraska to strengthen that professionalism and advancement pathway. You know, the majority of the state lives on the eastern side. We know that there is some excellent supports and systems because we live in our communities, right? Many of the county extension educators, as Tasha mentioned earlier, as a statewide educator, it's my responsibility to have a picture of the entire state. What do we need to do to identify where are these pockets? Where are these gaps? And how can we work with state partners and national partners to be really supporting a stronger equity and a stronger accessibility access point for that early care and education workforce. So we've now done this needs assessment. We've got the research. We start talking with our extension educators. They're saying, yes, you know, the CDA thing keeps popping back up too in our areas. We're working with some of our other community partners, and they mention it too, that, you know, early childhood educators might be able to find some training, but they're having some difficulty in this final piece. And so we used this framework to really set that groundwork to explore what would CDA programming efforts from Nebraska Extension's perspective look like. And that's what really helped us to start thinking about, like I said on that last slide, building a geographically diverse pool of PD specialists in Nebraska. So one of our first steps was to start thinking about, well, how do we find out how many professional development specialists we have in Nebraska? So here's where I'm kind of curious. How many of you know how many professional development specialists you might have in Nebraska? Or like how we have in Nebraska that you have in your state? We're going to put up a poll. All right, let's see. Yeah, isn't this surprising? Us too. So I guess I just want to affirm for the attendees, Nebraska was in the same position. So this was kind of our first snapshot. This is available on the council's website. You know, we just went on and we wanted to say, I wonder, like if we just look at a quick snapshot of our state and we think about this lack of quality childcare in rural Nebraska, we think about, you know, that parents are identifying they have a lack of quality care. Do childcare professionals in these areas have, you know, the resources to then seek something like a CDA, right? That's the first best step that signifies, right? That's been linked and shown in other studies to really boost and support quality measures and quality interactions in their classrooms and in their settings. And what we found, if you look at Nebraska, that these dots, right, these blue and red and green dots here showed, wow, the majority of our professional development specialists that cluster there, especially near the green and the blue and the red, were all on the eastern side of the state. That's the Omaha area. We had a few in the Lincoln area, hardly any north, hardly any south, a handful, 3 in the middle, and then we have this huge gap outside of that. And again, we're talking about active PD specialists, those who were consistently and constantly engaging in professional development visits as professional development verification visits, as Shonda mentioned, right? Making sure you're consistently checking your email, responding to candidates within 48 hours of a verification request, making sure that those qualifications were met and those compliance to the council's you know, policies and procedures for conducting a verification visit, and making sure that there was no conflict of interest. So using this initial information, it really confirmed what our extension educators, remember their role at a county level, were experiencing in their counties. Candidates might have been able to find training, though they experienced some barriers in accessing that training, but they were able to satisfy, for the most part, their 120 clock hours, but they were really struggling to finalize their CDA. So we took this next stage to then reach out to the council and say, would you mind going to the next slide for me? How do we find out, right? You all clicked no. So we said, well, how do we find out if the map is matching up to data, and or what else can we do to dig a little bit deeper? Because this just showed broadly how many were in the state, but what about by setting type, right? Shonda showed by infant, toddler, center, you know, preschool, family, and then home visitor. What was the breakdown by language specialization? How many PD specialists did we have that were bilingual? And so what we found was we had 32 active PD specialists, but only a handful at that time when we requested the data in 2018 were publicly available. We were able to request this form. This is a public form available on the council's website. The link is there and it'll be available in the handouts as well at the end. But we submitted that with an extension specialist, Dr. Amy Napoli, who helped us go through the data on our team. And we combed through it. And the other part that we found, which was really fascinating to us, was that we needed more bilingual specialists. Outside of the metro area, we had no bilingual specialists in some of the other areas, making it really difficult then for someone to complete their CDA if they wanted to specialize in that area. So now I'm going to share how we then built our plan to actually implement addressing some of these pieces. So Nebraska Extension educators, our first immediate step in 2019 was just to utilize our own internal staff to address immediate gaps in areas where there were no PDS specialists. So we wanted to be respectful and intentional in not building or duplicating additional PD specialists in the metropolitan area because there were already established independent contractor PD specialists there. So we started to look at the Grand Island area, which was that middle spot in the state, and then build out from there. We were really excited to then work with our state partner. Janae's going to talk about that, to say, hey, we want to talk and collaborate together and think about this professional development specialist and what is their role in the broader CDA pathway, and then what can we do internally to keep creating a professional learning community of Nebraska Extension specialists that can then be duplicated to support all PDS specialists across the state. Finally, we wanted to do national presentations like this with the council and with other cooperative extension agencies that are established nationwide to help higher education start to think more broadly beyond articulation, though that is a critical and necessary issue that does need to be addressed in helping transferring that CDA into an AA and then into a BA. So we're pleased to share, if you remember on a couple of slides ago, those little question marks, that we've added PD specialists and have helped work with state partners and national partners to make that CDA just strengthened. It was already well established in our state, but we were able to think about really identifying and building resources to make sure it was equitable and accessible. We've added additional bilingual PD specialists. One of our colleagues, Jackie Guzman, who's on the western end of the state. The two of us joke, I've got the east and she's got the west, and now we're going to strengthen the middle in increasing our bilingual PD specialists. We're also looking at thinking about how can we work to recruit within the early childhood field. We think it would be amazing if at some point it's the CDA candidates themselves who come back and become PD specialists, and they're the ones who are carrying the work forward, and we're serving in that capacity of the mentoring role. Because really the ultimate goal is to strengthen Nebraska's career advancement and professionalism pathways so that really the ones that benefit the most are the children and families. So now you're just going to hear a little bit about Nebraska's perspectives. And we're going to kind of break this down in a local to state and then a national level. So Tasha, could you kick us off?
Sure, thank you, Linda. I'm giving the local perspective because I'm out on the southwest area of Nebraska, and I'm in a rural community. And so we just really were seeing that, you know, they could get the trainings from us or from other independent contractors or from the Nebraska Department of Education. But then that kind of was a double-edged sword, because if I do the education, I can't come out and do your PDS, your visitation. So we kind of just wanted to look at that and how we could do that networking. So like Linda said, then, you know, if I have a fellow extension educators that could go out, I could refer them. Or if I know of a local independent PD specialist, I could, you know, refer them on as well. So just kind of looking at that, how do we manage that, especially when you're in a smaller area and you often are wearing multiple hats like all of us in this industry are. Just how do we look at that as a broader picture too? How can we support each other? So that's kind of my perspective. And I will pass it to Janae for the state perspective.
Thank you, Tasha. Hello again. The state's role was basically looking at the bigger picture for our state, and how were the EC professionals obtaining their CDA? What did that process look like? What were the components within that process? Could they be strengthened? And so we realized that we had to do something about bringing all of our partners together in Nebraska that were working on the CDA in their individual organizations. As we continue to strive to provide streamlined processes in Nebraska, we wanted to make sure that we weren't working in those silos anymore. Everyone is doing a great job, but oftentimes we are duplicating things or not thinking about how to share the load through funding or knowledge, etc. And so in order to make sure this doesn't happen and we don't duplicate the work, we created what we call a CDA roundtable. This team consisted of numerous partners that were either already working with the CDA, the council, or they have obtained their CDA, they've gone through that process, or they were just interested in collaborating with building a pathway for Nebraska. So in Nebraska, we have on our roundtable, we have 2 community organizations that are represented, 2 candidates that have gone through the process, our State Department, which consists of my co-laborer in this effort, who works with the colleges and the college consortium, and myself from the Office of Early Childhood. And then we also have from the State Department, the Career Technical Education Department, which is working on our high school pathway for CDA. And then as well as at least 3 community colleges and universities that represent on this particular team, and Nebraska Extension is included in that. And then as well as the CDA Council. So we had a variety of people on that team, a diverse bunch of people that are on that team as well. The CDA team was able to come together and begin to bridge the gap and start having the necessary conversations about what each organization was doing and what they've already done so far within the CDA scope of things. And so as we began to have those talks, we realized that we needed to combine those efforts. And so in combining those efforts, we broke down the silos and we began to build a structure, which we call the CDA pathway for Nebraska. And we began to look at the strategies in which we wanted to have desirable outcomes. So all in all, our role as the state was pretty much bringing the partners together and providing the overall support so that we can build a solid structure for the CDA pathway, which all in all is for our early childhood professional. I'll pass it back over to Linda.
Thanks, Janae. If you have not had an opportunity yet to check out the handouts that are available, please do so, because the pathway that Janae referenced is available for download. You can also check out our Nebraska Extension PDS Specialist handout that's available that lists all of our Nebraska Extension specialists that are available throughout our state. And I'll share here in a minute about this national perspective, but I think it's important to highlight how at a state level, this has been so helpful to be partnering and working intentionally with our state partner, because it has really addressed some of the barriers that might have impacted our ability, right, to, as Janae said, address some of the silos or make sure that we weren't missing any potential avenues to share information with a broader audience. You know, we really want to make sure that we're reducing the obstacles that prevent that access in supporting the candidate to finalize from beginning to end their entire CDA. And that can be a challenge wrapping up that last piece. And so that's really just been a benefit for us. Finally, at a national level, we really wanted to have a partnership with the council. That was really important to us and something we really advocated for as an agency within Nebraska. We know there may be others who, you know, are doing CDA work or maybe training around those areas. but we really felt it was important to make sure that we were an active and intentional partner with the council and invested in making sure that everything we were doing was really rooted in the best practices and most current information that the council is and continues to do. And so they've also been able to help us address barriers that we've run into and helped us network with other states. We have had some really great ideas. And so those meetings have been fruitful to our discussion. They've even helped us think about, with bordering states, how could we share PD specialists across states? Because sometimes your closest PD specialist might be the person on the other side of the border and not the PD specialist the next county up. And finally, the last part that has been really helpful for us too is that being part of an extension network, others are hearing about how we've partnered with the state and partnered with the council, and they'd like to duplicate the system and the structures that we put into Nebraska. And we're happy to share that and open to meeting with others on how they might make this work for their own state. So I think now we're gonna transition back to the council, but really have an opportunity for some question and answers and dialogue.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you, Janae and Tasha, for your perspective and giving those great tips and strategies for how you partnered with both the state and the council to increase your PD specialists in your state. So we're going to move to some questions. You do have a question box there, so take a few minutes to ask your questions and I'll read them aloud and have some of our presenters today answer them based on, you know, their experience. Just take a few more minutes. If you don't, and nobody has any questions, then we'll move forward and conclude our presentation. All right. It seems that nobody has any questions, but if you do, I do have some emails to share with you. If you have any questions.
Alicia, I'm sorry, we do have one question. It's, do you provide any additional stipends or money to the PDS in your state? I think this is directed to our state representatives. And the comment is that the feedback is that the council's honorarium of $100 is low. And so I can answer part of that, but I also invite, you know, our state representative to talk about some of the incentives that they've implemented to supplement the honorarium. The council is always, you know, evaluating constantly different ways to support our PDS network, understanding the critical role they play in providing support to our candidate NCDA process. So we are conducting research around compensation in that regard, but understanding, you know, casting a wide net and being able to kind of leverage and support all of these kind of different locales and economies, it's not a very quick endeavor that we can engage into. So it would take some scaling, but it is something that we're considering, although we don't have, unfortunately, any new information to share on that front at this time. But it's a great question. And now I'll defer to maybe Janae or someone from, the State Department of Nebraska or Extension to respond to some of the incentives that they've implemented from that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Katora. So like Katora said, for the state, we are currently exploring options. That is one of the discussions that is up on our roundtable discussion about how we can help get more PD specialists, especially when we look at that honorarium. We currently don't have anything set in place for this particular from the state. So yeah, we are still searching and making sure that we have all of the information before we move to the next steps. I don't know, Linda, maybe you want to kind of chime in because that's tied within your particular organization as well.
Yep. So in our state, this is sort of why we set if you remember back to that slide that said short, mid, and long-term goals, this is really one of those mid and long-term goals of working with our state partners. We know that other states, particularly some of our bordering states, have done a great job working with some of their local NAUIC chapters or other grant funding organizations to help identify additional funds to offset and supplement that verification or the verification visit costs that a PD specialist might incur. And so we want to have a role again in supporting all PD specialists throughout Nebraska, not just agency PDS that are attached to Nebraska Extension. If we go all the way back to that first slide, we are part of the state's university, which means we have a mandate to respond and carry out our state's work. And so our state made the decision, our early childhood team, based on program implementation, that we will do this work, period, and go forth from there. And until we can establish some of these other additional pieces and take the lead so that we can address some of these gaps that we have throughout our state.
Thanks. We do have a comment that I want to announce, and I think it would be helpful to connect with Janae and Linda to see how to expand this. The comment is that honorarium does not provide any incentive to increase PD specialists in the area, and Massachusetts is in desperate need for PD specialists.
Hello, this is Shonda Walden with the council. Keep in mind, this is an honorarium, and we make known what that honorarium amount is up front. The council does recognize that this is just a very small honorarium, and it does not, it really, our PD specialists do much, much, much more work than the $100 honorarium. So the council does acknowledge that. And also that a part of that CDA candidate application fee, from that comes the honorarium. So, there are a few things that, we all have to keep in mind. If the honorarium was increased, that may increase the candidate's application fee. So, there's a fine balance that we have to make sure that we create. And I hope that at least somewhat answers or responds to that concern.
And can I chime in on that one, Shonda?
Sure.
It's important, like Linda said, and I said earlier, that you look at the different partners that are in your state, like NEAYC, see what they can do, or the TEACH scholarships, see what they can do to help in that capacity. And it's just important to explore all of your options because we understand that our PD specialists, they do a lot of work during that time, and $100, you're like, this is not enough. Yes, we do understand that, but it's important, like I said earlier, that we pull together our partners in our states and see how we can share that load of funding and knowledge and see how we can help with that, which is why our PD specialists are really coming from our Nebraska Extension area, because we don't have that funding piece right now. So yeah, I would just say explore all of your options, do a lot of research, kind of contact your organizations that are in your area that are working with the EC professionals, and see what it takes to build something up for an incentive.
Yeah, I think you did it. That's exactly it. And we'd be happy to talk further. I think on the next slide, Alicia was going to share like our contact information, and certainly, you know, the PDS team is really that first, you know, point of contact too. But we are presenting today because this isn't something that we're hearing for the first time. Massachusetts is like, though very geographically different, right, in a sense, but our story is not uncommon is what we're hearing and learning.
Yeah, and I'd also like to say that this is a point of thought that the council has, you know, taken into consideration over some time. So I don't want people to think that, you know, we're ignoring that, we're not. And there are some constraints to increasing that honorarium fee, because those funds would have to come from somewhere. So where does it come from? And those are the things that, you know, we have to keep in mind, because at the end of the day, you know, if we increase the application fee, then that, you know, will have a significant impact on our applicants, and so we don't want that. So where do we find that happy space for everyone? We haven't found it yet, but the council is exploring that. So I don't want you all to think that it's falling on deaf ears. This is an issue that we are in continuous dialogue about at the council.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Just to be respectful of everyone's time, I do want to move forward, but I think this is a very important conversation, and I think Massachusetts and Nebraska should definitely connect to see how they can implement some of these strategies and find more ways to get more PD specialists in Massachusetts to help supply that demand you have for your CDA candidates. So in the next slide, well, before we move forward, if you have any council-specific questions for PD specialists, for our partnerships, if you're interested in partnering with the council with your program, or if you have any questions regarding the consortium, our emails are here. So the consortium would be the alumni email. PDS Specialists, obviously, is that PDS one, and partnerships for extending that, gaining a partnership with the council for your current CDA program. To speak with, oh, I'm sorry, before I go there, I do want to remind everyone that our EELC is coming up. It is in October. We are already in June, and registration is underway. So please join. It is a great time to continue to network and build leadership skills with our field and with your peers. And you can use this link here, or you can go to our website where you can find the registration. And to talk more with Janae or with our Nebraska Extension, please contact them with these emails. I think this conversation was great, and it sounds like it really needs to be extended more. So have a good rest of your day. Have a good weekend, everyone. And I hope to see everyone at our next webinar series.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.